Welcome to a world of mystery!
Dan Pines.
The tax collector! You found me!
Sorry to hear that. Let's just remove these. Oh, that's way too high. That's better. Hi, streaming too soon sign. Hi, me. Ha! 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 There we go. Remove that too. Oh, sorry, Twix. Thanks. That's the item for this this book. There's been a different one for each book, so not that it matters in any way whatsoever. But I hope you've been paying attention. Stuck at for sale sign in the dash and have it parked at the church I'm working at tomorrow on Sunday. So I really hope selling a truck at a churchyard sale. That's the best way to do it. I would have started sooner, but I was boiling some water. Cheers. 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 Jesus wants you to buy this truck. You can be a holy roller. So it's kind of cool here this evening. It's raining out. And I decided that I wanted some hot cocoa. But I'm pretty sure I haven't bought hot cocoa in a good... Look, man, it's not you who wants the truck, but it's God who wants you to buy this truck. And can I get an amen? And about 1,500. Praise! I'm dumb. So yeah, I haven't, pretty sure I haven't bought hot cocoa in at least 5 years. So I found some hot cocoa in my pantry. That's probably pretty old. And I'm not sure if it's supposed to have mini marshmallows in it or not, or those are just spider eggs. So I guess I'll find out. It'll be a treat either way. I'm hoping for marshmallows. Alright, gonna find out. It's gonna be fun. It'll be a learning experience for us all. Mostly me. I'm hoping this is gonna develop in a scene for me. Don't worry. Anything that goes in my body is dead long before it can do anything to me after I eat it. I don't know if what that says about me, but you know, I can kill aliens. Thank you, Summer, for the host. I really do appreciate it. I could fix the echo, but that would require effort. And that's not my style. It's never been my style. Yes, very clearly says great things about me. And my body. My body. Last time. What happened last time when we read? I believe Eustace and Mariel and their dog Courage dealt with cats at Cat's Motel. There was a great game of handball, I believe. And just wacky things happened from there. No, that doesn't sound right. Okay, Eustace and Jill. And, Frogface, I believe, was the name he liked to go by. Frogface sounds right. They were the March Wiggle. I'd look back, I forgot the actual name of the creature. They were journeying and looking so forward to a giant's castle / city area that so much so that they were forgetting what Aslan told them earlier in the book. They had to remember. Thank you, Riddy, for the host. I really do appreciate it. and thanks for being here. And they did make it to the Giant's Castle right when the Autumn Feast was about to begin. But they realized that they had kind of lost their way because they haven't been focusing on the quest that they're actually there to do. So now, without telling the Giants what they're up to, because they're not sure if the Giants will be helpful or harmful to what they're doing, they are planning to escape during the festivities of the big Autumn Feast. And it'll be a fantastic adventure and fantastic journey, I am sure. So join me, won't you, for Chapter 9 of The Cyver Chair. Cyver Chair, yep. AG. Not the element. All good. And thank you for shouting out Rob. He deserves it. He's an awesome streamer. He's going to be streaming a lot next week to make up for a few streams that had canceled this week. So anybody that doesn't follow Rob should totally follow Rob and hang out at his channel. And just have a good time. Because it's always a good time over there. In the land of Robnia. Yeah, I think that was a spider egg. Anyway, let's get going. Chapter 9. Chapter the 9th, rather. My apologies. Foolish. Thank you for shouting out Tori as well. But you're not lame or old to... Well, you're not old to me because I'm older than you are. And you're not lame to anybody here. I mean, it'll probably happen. I'll probably become a Spidey power guy. I'll be the astounding Spidey guy. Yeah. Trademark. Chapter the 9th. And thank you for shouting me out as well, Summer. you're putting in overtime for me. Before you know it, you realize you lived in Queens all this. Yeah, it's true. Over in the Forest Hills neighborhood, you know. Forest Hills, Ravenswood, you know. They're pretty much the same thing. There's a sign outside of my neighborhood. And I live in the neighborhood of in the general area of Ravenswood. I don't think Ravenswood is actually called the neighborhood. I don't think they recognize it all the time. There's a stupid billboard, and I hate it so much. As soon as you enter Ravenswood, there's a billboard that just shows this astounded woman like... And the slogan is, Ravenswood? Who Ravenswooded? And I hate it so much. Because it's so awful. Racing, so lurking, but listening. No worries. Lurk and enjoy as much as you can. And now that I've talked about nothing for long enough, and I'm going to have another drink of my spider egg soup. You can really taste the legs. We will start Chapter 9. So, here we go. For realsies. Chapter the 9th. How they discovered something worth knowing. You should burn it down to... Okay. I'll do that right after stream. I mean, what? Sorry, I'm still thinking. No, don't worry about it. Anyway, Chapter 9th. How they discovered something worth knowing. The others admitted afterward that Jill had been wonderful that day. As soon as the king and the rest of the hunting party had set off, she began making a tour of the whole castle and asking questions, but all in such an innocent, babyish way that no one could suspect her of any secret design. Though her tongue was never still, you could hardly say she talked. She prattled and giggled. She made love to everyone, the grooms, the porters, the housemaids, the ladies-in-waiting, and the elderly giant lords whose hunting days were past. What a skank. What? She submitted to being kissed and pawed about by any number of giantesses, many of whom seemed sorry for her and called her a poor little thing, though none of them explained why. She made especial friends with the cook and discovered the all-important fact that there was a scullery. dull, dull scullery door which let you out through the outer wall, so that you did not have to cross the courtyard or pass the great gatehouse. In the kitchen, she pretended to be greedy and ate all sorts of scraps. I don't have to pretend to be that. All sorts of scraps which the cook and scullions delighted to give her. But upstairs among the ladies, she asked questions about how she would be dressed for the great feast, and how long she would be allowed to sit up, and whether she would have to dance with some very, very small giant. And then, it made her hot all over when she remembered it afterwards, she would put her head on one side in idiotic fashion, which grown-ups, giant and otherwise, thought very fetching, and shake her curls, and fidget and say, "Oh, I do wish it was tomorrow night, don't you? Do you think this time will go by quickly till then?" And all the giantess thought she was a perfect little darling, and some of them dabbed. I wish I had V's dab. I should make V's dab a command. I think I'll do that for next time. Just the link to it. Yeah, I think that's... Alright, I'm distracting myself. And some of them dabbed their eyes with enormous handkerchiefs, as if they were going to cry. "They're dear little things at that age," said one giantess to another. "It seems almost a pity." Yeah, that's what I'll do. Scrub and Puddleglum both did their best, but girls do that kind of thing better than boys. Even boys do it better than Marshwiggles. At lunchtime, something happened which made all three of them more anxious than ever to leave the castle of the gentle giants. Ho, ho, ho. They had lunch... Oh, it's the green giants. They had lunch in the great hall at a little table of their own, near the fireplace. At a bigger table, about 20 yards away, half a dozen old giants were lunching. Their conversation was so noisy and so high up in the air that the children soon took no more notice of it than you would of hooters outside the window, or traffic noises in the street. They were eating cold venison, a kind of food which Jill had never tasted before, and she was liking it. Suddenly Puddleglum turned to them, and his face had gone so pale that you could see the paleness under the natural muddiness of his complexion. He said, "Don't eat another bite." "What's wrong?" asked the other two in a whisper. "Didn't you hear what those giants were saying? That's a nice tender haunch of venison," said one of them. "Then that stag was a liar." And another, "Why?" said the first one. "Oh," said the other. "They say when he was caught he said, 'Don't kill me, I'm tough, you won't like me.'" For a moment Jill did not realize the full meaning of this, but she did when Scrub's eyes opened wide with horror and he said, "So, what we've been eating is a talking stag?" The discovery didn't have exactly the same effect on all of them. Jill, who was new to that world, was sorry for the poor stag and thought it was rotten of the giants to have killed him. Scrub, who had been in the world before and had at least one talking beast as his dear friend, felt horrified, as you might feel about a murder. But Puddleglum, who was Narnian born, was sick and faint, and felt as you would feel if you found you had eaten a baby. Know that feeling. We brought the anger of Aslan on us," he said. That's what comes of those of not attending to the signs. We're under a curse, I expect. If it was allowed, it would be the best thing we could do, to take these knives and drive them into our own hearts." And gradually, even Jill came to see it from his point of view. At any rate, none of them wanted any more lunch, and as soon as they thought it was safe, they crept quietly out of the hall. I hope the audio levels are okay, by the way. It was now drawing near to that time of the day on which their hopes of escape depended, and all became nervous. They hung about in passages and waited for things to become quiet. The giants in the hall sat on a dreadfully long time after the meal was over. The bald one was telling a story. When that was over, the three travelers dawdled down to the kitchen. But there was still plenty of giants there, or at least in the scullery, washing up and putting things away. It was agonizing, waiting till these finished their jobs, and one by one wiped their hands and went away. At last, only one old giantess was left in the room. She pottered about, and at last the three travelers... Thank you, Summer. The three travelers realized with horror that she did not intend to go away at all. "Well, dearies," she said to them, "that job's about through. Let's put the kettle there. That'll make a nice cup of tea presently. Now I can have a little bit of rest. Just look into the scullery, like good puppets, and tell me if the back door is open." "Yes, it is," said Scrub. "That's right. I can always leave it open so as Puss can get in and out. The poor thing." Then she sat down on one chair and put her feet up on another. "I don't know as I mightn't have 40 winks, said the giantess, "if only that blamey hunting party doesn't come back too soon." All their spirits leaped up when she mentioned 40 winks and flopped down again when she mentioned the return of the hunting party. "When do they usually come back?" asked Jill. "You can never tell," said the giantess. "But there, go and be quiet for a bit, my dearies." They retreated to the far end of the kitchen, and would have slipped out into the scullery there, and then, if the giantess had not sat up, opened her eyes, and brushed away a fly. Don't try it till we're sure she's really asleep," whispered Scrub, "or it'll spoil everything." So they all huddled at the kitchen inn, waiting and watching. The thought that the hunters might come back at any moment was terrible, and the giantess was fidgety. Whenever they thought she had really gone to sleep, she moved. "I can't bear this," thought Jill. To distract her mind, she began looking about her. Just in front of her was a clean, wide table with 2 clean pie dishes on it, and an open book. They were giant pie dishes, of course. That sounds amazing. Jill thought that she could lie down just comfortably in one of them. Then she climbed up on a bench beside the table to look at the book. She read, "Mallard, the delicious bird can be cooked in a variety of ways." "It's a cookery book," thought Jill without much interest, and glanced over her shoulder. The giantess's eyes were shut, but she didn't look as if she was properly asleep. Jill glanced back at the book. It was arranged alphabetically, and at the very next entry, her heart seemed to stop beating. It ran, "Man, this elegant little biped has long been valued as a delicacy. It forms a traditional part of the autumn feast, and is served between the fish and the joint. Each man—" But she could not bear to read any more. She turned round. The giantess had waked up and was having a fit of coughing. Jill nudged the other two and pointed to the book. They also mounted the bench and bent over the huge pages. Scrub was still reading about how to cook men when Puddleglum pointed to the next entry below it. It was like this: "Marshwiggle. Such authorities reject this animal altogether as unfit for giants' consumption because of its stringy consistency and muddy flavor. The flavor can, however, be greatly reduced if—" Jill touched his feet and Scrub's gently, and all three looked back at the giantess. Her mouth was slightly open, and from her nose there came a sound which at the moment was more welcome to them than any music. She snored. And now it was a question of tiptoe work, tippy-toe. Not daring to go too fast, hardly daring to breathe, out through the scullery. Giant sculleries smell horrid. Out at last into the pale sunlight of the winter afternoon. They were at the top of the rough little path, which ran steeply down, and thank heavens, on the right side of the castle, the city ruinous was in sight. In a few minutes, they were back on the broad, steep road, which led down from the main gate of the castle. They were also in full view from every single window on that side. If it had been 1 or 2 or 5 windows, that'd be a reasonable chance that no one might be looking out. But there were nearer 50 than 5. They now realized, too, that the road on which they were, and indeed all the ground between them and the city ruinous, didn't offer as much cover as would hide a fox. It was all coarse grass and pebbles and flat stones. To make matters worse, they were now in the clothes that the giants had provided them last night, except Puddleglum, whom nothing would fit. Jill wore a vivid green robe, rather too long for her, and over that a scarlet mantle fringed with white fur. Scrub had scarlet stockings, blue tunic and cloak, a gold-hilted sword, and a feathered bonnet. "Nice bits of color you two are," muttered Puddleglum. "Show up very prettily on a winter day. The worst archer in the world couldn't miss either one of you. The worst archer in the world couldn't miss either one of you if you were in range. And talking of archers, we'll be sorry not to have our own bows before long. I shouldn't wonder. Bit thin, too. Those clothes of yours, are they?" "Yes, I'm freezing already," said Jill. A few minutes ago, when they had been in the kitchen, she had thought that if only they could once get out of the castle, their escape would be almost complete. She now realized that the most dangerous part of it was still to come. "Steady, steady," said Puddleglum. Puddleglum. "Don't look back. Don't walk too quickly. Whatever you do, don't run. Look as if we were just taking a stroll. And then, if anyone sees us, he might, just possibly, not bother. The moment we look like people running away, we're done." The distance to the city ruinous seemed longer than Jill would have believed possible. But bit by bit, they were covering it. Then came a noise. The other two gasped. Jill, who didn't know what it was, said, "What at?" "Hunting horn," whispered Scrub. "But don't run, even now," said Puddleglum. "Not till I give the word." This time Jill couldn't help glancing over her shoulder. There, about half a mile away, was the hunt returning from behind them on the left. They walked down. Suddenly a great clamor of giant voices arose. Then shouts and hollahs. They've seen us. Run, said Puddleglum. Jill gathered up her long skirts, horrible things for running in, and ran. There was no mistaking the danger now. She could hear the music of the hounds. She could hear the king's voice roaring out, After them, or we'll have no man-pies tomorrow! She was the last of the three now, cumbered with her dress, slipping on loose stones, her hair getting in her mouth, running pains across her chest. The hounds were much nearer. Now she had to run uphill on the stony slope, which led to the lowest step of the giant stairway. She had no idea what they would do when they got there, or how they would be any better off, even if they reached the top. But she didn't think about that. She was like a hunted animal now. As long as the pack was after her, she must run till she dropped. The Marshwiggle was ahead. As he came to the lowest step, he stopped, looked a little to his right, and all of a sudden darted into a little hole or crevice at the bottom of it. His long legs, disappearing into it, looked very like those of a spider. Scrub hesitated and then vanished after him. Jill, breathless and reeling, came to the place about a minute later. It was an unattractive hole. Heard that before. A crack between the earth and the stone about 3 feet long and hardly more than a foot high. You had to fling yourself flat on the face and crawl in. You couldn't do it very quickly either. She felt sure that the dog's teeth would close on her heel before she got inside. Quick, quick. Stones. Fill up the opening. Came Puddleglum's voice in the darkness beside her. It was pitch black in there, except for the gray light in the opening by which she had crawled in. The other two were working hard. She could see Scrub's small hands and the Marshwiggle's big frog-like hands black against the light, working desperately to pile up stones. Then she realized how important this was, and began groping for the large stones herself, and handing them to others. Before the dogs were baying and yelping at the cave mouth. They had it pretty well filled, and now, of course, there was no light at all. Farther in, quick, said Puddleglum's voice. Let's all hold hands, said Jill. Good idea, said Scrub. But it took them quite a long time to find those hands in the darkness. The dogs were sniffing at the other side of the barrier now. Try if we can stand up, suggested Scrub. They did, and found that they could. Then Puddleglum's holding out a hand behind him to Scrub, and Scrub holding a hand out behind him to Jill, who wished very much that she was the middle one of the party and not the last. They began groping with their feet and stumbling forward into the blackness. It was all loose stones underfoot. Then Puddleglum came up to a wall of rock. They turned a little to their right and went on. There was a good many more twists and turns. Jill had now no sense of direction at all, and no idea where the mouth of the cave lay. The question is, came Puddleglum's voice out of darkness ahead, whether taking one thing with another, it wouldn't be better to go back, if we can, and give the giants a treat at that feast of theirs, instead of losing our way in the guts of a hill, where, to no one, there's dragons, and deep holes, and gases, and water, and Ow! Let go! Save yourselves! After that all happened quickly, there was a wild cry, a swishing, dusty, gravelly noise, a rattle of stones, and Jill found herself sliding, hopelessly sliding, and sliding quicker every moment down a slope that grew steeper every moment. It was not a smooth, firm slope, but a slope of small stones and rubbish. Even if you could have stood up, it would have been no use. Any bit of that slope that you had put your foot on would have slid away from under you and carried you down with it, but Jill was more lying than standing, and the farther they all slid, the more they disturbed all the stones and earth, so that the general downward rush of everything, including themselves, got faster and louder and dustier and dirtier, from the sharp cries and swearing of the other two. Jill got the idea that many of the stones she was dislodging were hitting Scrub and Puddleglum pretty hard, and now she was going at a furious rate, and felt sure she was broken to bits at the bottom. Yet somehow they weren't. They were a mass of bruises, and the wet, sticky stuff on her face appeared to be blood, and such a mass of loose earth, shingle, and larger stones were piled up around her, and partly over her, that she couldn't get up. The darkness was so complete that it made no difference at all whether you had your eyes open or shut. There was no noise, and that was the very worst moment Jill had ever known in her life. Supposing she was alone, supposing the others... Then she heard movements around her, and presently all three, in shaken voices, were explaining that none of them seemed to have any broken bones. We can never get up there again, said Scrub's voice. And have you noticed how warm it is? Said the voice of Puddleglum. That means we're a long way down. Might be nearly a mile. No one said anything. Some time later, Puddleglum added, My tinder box has gone. Swipe left. After another long pause, Jill said, I'm terribly thirsty. No one suggested doing anything. There was so obviously nothing to be done. For the moment, they did not feel it quite so badly as one might have expected. That was because they were so tired. Long, long afterward, without the slightest warning, an utterly strange voice spoke. They knew at once that it was not the one voice in the whole world for which each had secretly been hoping, the voice of Aslan. It was a dark, flat voice, almost as if you knew what that means, a pitch-black voice. It said, "What make you here, creatures of the overworld?" End of chapter 9. Thank you for shouting out Oscar. And howdy, Oscar. How you doing? Growlith. And howdy to HS, popped in during. Ah, there's Summer shouting me out from earlier. Yeah, I need to make that command. It needs to be a thing. How you doing, HS? Thanks for being here. Oscar, how you doing? Also, thanks for being here. Y'all are spectacular. Everybody here is spectacular as far as I'm concerned, except Electric Skateboard. Delay reaction makes no sense now, but... You're creeping me out. Y'all are creepy. Spooky mystery afoot. We'll go back to clip. What? Sticky stuff. Oh, Oscar. I'm having an okay evening, thank you. Howdy, Ranger. Crisscross. Thank you for the crisscross and thank you for the applesauce. Delicious. Delicious, as my friends used to say. When I had friends. In real life. It is the boss. Excellent chapter 9 rating. Thank you. Happy weekend to all. And to you as well. Slides in quietly while I get in my car to drive home. Safe travels, Toria. Boobots. Fantastic. Still have no idea who runs electric skateboard or longboard. Yeah, I'm right there with you. I've been to the channel itself, and I'm not really sure. Thanks for clapping for the chapter as well. Huh? What is a mark on my mug? I don't like it. I want some water. Ah, good. Good. Wonderful. Wonderful. Lawrence Welk. I don't know what I'm doing. But I have this Growlithe mug. Courtesy of Mr. Rob Jura. Rumor on Dr. Terra in chat room is that your next book is Tuesdays with Maury. Oh, Dr. Terra AOL chat room. You think the next book after I finish the 2 Narnia books I have left, including this one, is Tuesdays with Maury? I honestly don't have a pick for my next book. I can let people decide if they want to. Well, how could I not dig it? It's got Growlithe on it. And we all know that I love Growlithe. Growlithe! I was telling Toria earlier. That's what I heard. Okay. Surprised you didn't hear that on, on the playground as well. Next to the kid who's saying that his uncle works at Nintendo and knows all about the next Pokemon game. I have no clue what my next book is, so we will see. I thought Terry was going to read Lord of the Rings. It's a sad tale. Yeah, I'm familiar with how it goes. Maybe? I really don't have anything set out for that. I might take a break with one of the many books I got in a humble bundle of ebooks. That might be fun. I heard one of them's like kind of a mystery comedy kind of book, so that might be fun to read. I have no idea how it is. It seemed to have gotten praise. I don't remember the exact title, so yeah. Might be fun. I don't know. Uncle Oscar reads books too. I believe it. It is an awesome mug. From an awesome guy. Alright. I've talked about very little to nothing for a long time. I'm sorry that your computer froze, HS. I hope it's warming up to my stream. I'm a horrible viewer right now. Nah, it's fine. You're doing other tangs. I can't fault you for doing other tangs. I'm just happy to have you here. I'm happy to have Oscar. I'm happy to have HS here. Happy to have Toria listening on her way home. Happy to have Summer here. Happy to have Rob here. Happy to have any lurkers here as well. Ice kicking button, MK. Very nice. Next chapter hype. Let's get started on the next chapter. It sounds like a good plan. Let's just, no, I understand. You focus on winning those races, young lady. I will be here, rooting for you silently. With my camera that's not installed in your home. Anyway. Chapter the 10th. Travels without the sun. Who's there? Shouted the three travelers. I am the warden of the marches of Underland, and with me stand 100 Earthmen in arms, came the reply. Tell me quickly, who you are and what is your errand in the deep realm? We fell down by accident, said Puddleglum truthfully enough. Many fall down, and few return to the sunlit lands, said the voice. Make ready now to come with me to the Queen of the Deep Realm. What does she want with us? Asked Scrub cautiously. I do not know, said the voice. Her will is not to be questioned, but obeyed. While he said these words, there was a noise like a soft explosion. And immediately a cold light, gray with a little blue in it, flooded the cavern. All hope that the speaker had been idly boasting when he spoke with 100 armed followers died at once. She found herself blinking and staring at a dense crowd. They were of all sizes, from little gnomes barely a foot high to stately figures taller than men. All carried 3-pronged spears in their hands, and all were dreadfully pale, and all stood as still as statues. Apart from that, they were very different. Some had tails and others not. Some wore great beards, and others had very round, smooth faces, big as pumpkins. There were long pointed noses and long soft noses like small trunks and great blobby noses. Several had single horns in the middle of their foreheads, but in one respect they were all alike. Every face in the whole 100 was as sad as a face could be. They were so sad that after the first glance Jill almost forgot to be afraid of them. She felt she would like to cheer them up. Well, said Puddleglum, rubbing his hands. This is just what I needed. If these chaps don't teach me to take a serious view of life, I don't know what will. Look at that fellow with the walrus mustache, or that one with the... Get up, said the leader of the Earthmen. There was nothing else to be done. The three travelers scrambled to their feet and joined hands. One wanted the touch of a friend's hand at a moment like that, and the Earthmen came all round them, patting on large soft feet, on which some had 10 toes, some 12, and others none. March, said the warden, and march they did. The cold light came from a large ball on top of a long pole, and the tallest of the gnomes carried this at the head of the procession. By its cheerless rays, they could see that they were in a natural cavern. The walls and roofs were knobbed, twisted, and gashed into 1,000 fantastic shapes, and the stony floor sloped downwards as they proceeded. It was worse for Jill than the others because she hated dark underground places. I mean, who doesn't? And as they went on, the cave got lower and narrower, and when at last the light bearer stood aside and the gnomes, one by one, stooped down, all except the very smallest ones, and stepped into a little dark crack and disappeared, she felt she could bear it no longer. I can't go in there. I can't. Won't. She panted. The Earthmen said nothing, but they all lowered their spears and pointed them at her. "Steady, Pole," said Puddleglum. "Those big fellas won't be crawling in there if it didn't get wider later on. And there's only one thing about this underground work: we shan't get any rain." "Oh, you don't understand. I can't," wailed Jill. "Think how I felt on that cliff, Pole." My mistake. "Think how I felt on that cliff, Pole," said Scrub. "You go first, Puddleglum, and I'll come after." "That's right," said the Marsh Wiggle, getting down on his hands and knees. "You keep a grip on my heels, Pole, and Scrub will hold on to yours. Then we'll all be comfortable." "Comfortable?" said Jill, but she got down and they crawled in on their elbows. It was a nasty place. You had to go flat on your face for what seemed like a half an hour, though it may really have only been about 5 minutes. It was hot. Jill felt she was being smothered, but at last a dim light showed ahead. The tunnel grew wider and higher, and they came out hot, dirty, and shaken into a cave so large that it scarcely seemed a cave at all. It was full of a dim, drowsy radiance, so that here they had no need of the Earthmen's strange lantern. The floor was soft with some kind of moss, and out of this grew many strange shapes, branched and tall like trees, but flabby like mushrooms. They stood too far apart to make a forest. It was more like a park. The light, a greenish-gray, seemed to come both from them and from the moss, and it was not strong enough to reach the roof of the cave, which must have been a long way overhead. Across the mild, soft, sleepy place they were now made to march. It was very sad, but with a quiet sort of sadness, like soft music. Here they passed dozens of strange animals lying on the turf, either dead or asleep. Jill could not tell which. These were mostly of a dragonish or bat-like sort. Puddleglum did not know what any of them were. "Do they grow here?" Scrub asked the warden. He seemed very surprised at being spoken to, but replied, "No. They're all beasts that have found their way down by the chasms and caves out of the overland into the deep realm. Many come down, and few return to the sunlit lands. It is said that they will all wake at the end of the world." His mouth shut like a box when he had said this, and in the great silence of that cave the children felt that they would not dare to speak to him again. The bare feet of the gnomes padding on the deep moss made no sound. There was no wind. There were no birds. There was no sound of water. There was no sound of breathing from the strange beasts. When they had walked for several miles, they came to a wall of rock, and in it a low archway leading into another cavern. It was not, however, so bad as the last entrance, and Jill could go through it without bending her head. It brought them into a smaller cave, long and narrow, about the shape and size of a cathedral, and here, filling almost the whole length of it, lay an enormous man, fast asleep. He was far bigger than any of the other giants. And his face was not like a giant's, but noble and beautiful. His breast rose and fell gently under the snowy beard, which covered him to the waist. A pure silver light, no one saw where it came from, rested upon him. "Santa?" "Who's that?" asked Puddleglum, and it was so long since anyone had spoken that Jill wondered how he had the nerve. This is old Father Time, who was once a king in Overland," said the warden, "and now he has sunk deep into the deep realm and lies dreaming of all the things that are done in the upper world. Many sink down, and few return to the sunlit lands. They say that he will wake at the end of the world." And out of that cave they passed into another, and then into another, and so on, till Jill lost count, at about 4. But always they were going downhill, and each cave was lower than the last, till the very thought of the weight and depth of the earth above you was suffocating. At last they came to a place where the warden commanded his cheerless lantern to be lit again. Then they passed into a cave so wide and dark that they could see nothing of it except that right in front of them, a strip of pale sand ran down into the still water, and there, beside a little jetty, lay a ship without a mast or sail, but with many oars. They were made to go on board. They were made to go on board her and lead forward to the bows, where there was a clear space in front of the rowers' benches and a seat running inside the bulwarks. "One thing I'd like to know," said Puddleglum, "is whether anyone from our world, from up atop, I mean, has ever done this trip before." "Many have taken ship at the Pale Beaches," replied the warden, "and—" "Yes, I know," interrupted Puddleglum, "and few return to the sunlit lands. You needn't say it again. You are a chap of one idea, aren't you?" The children huddled close together on each side of Puddleglum. They had thought him a wet blanket while they were still above ground, but down here he seemed the only comforting thing they had. Then the pale lantern was hung up amidships. The Earthmen sat to the oars, and the ship began to move. The lantern cast its light only a very short way. Looking ahead, they could see nothing but smooth, dark water fading into absolute blackness. "Oh, whatever will become of us," said Jill despairingly. Now don't you let your spirits down, Paul," said the Marsh Wiggle. "There's one thing you've got to remember. We're back on the right lines. We were to go under the ruined city, and we are under it. We're following the instructions again." Presently they were given food, flat, flabby cakes of some sort, which had hardly any taste, and after that they gradually fell asleep. But when they woke, everything was just the same. The gnomes still rowing, the ship still gliding on, still dead blackness ahead. How often they woke and slept and ate and slept again, none of them could even remember. And the worst thing about it was that you began to feel as if you'd always lived on that ship, in that darkness, and to wonder whether sun and blue skies and winds and birds had only ever been a dream. They had almost given up hoping or being afraid about anything when at last they saw lights ahead, dreary lights like that of their own lantern. Then, quite suddenly, one of these lights came close, and they saw that they were passing another ship. After that, they met several ships. Then, staring till their eyes hurt, they saw some of the lights ahead were shining on what looked like wharfs, walls, towers, and moving crowds. But still, there was hardly any noise. "By Jove," said Scrub, "a city!" And soon they all saw that he was right. But it was a queer city. The lights were so few and far apart that they would hardly have done for scattered cottages in our world. But the little bits of the place where you could see the light by the lights were like glimpses of a great seaport. You could make out in one place a whole crowd of ships loading or unloading. In another, bales of stuff and warehouses. In a third, walls and pillars that suggested great palaces or temples. And always, wherever the light fell, endless crowds, hundreds of Earthmen, jostling one another as they padded softly about their business in narrow streets, broad squares, or up great flights of steps. Their continued movement made a sort of soft murmuring noise as the ship drew nearer and nearer. But there was not a song or a shout or a bell or the rattle of a wheel anywhere. The city was as quiet and nearly as dark as the inside of an anthill. At last their ship was brought alongside a quay and made fast. The three travelers were taken ashore and marched up into the city. Crowds of Earthmen, no two alike, rubbed shoulders with them in the crowded streets, and the sad light fell on many sad and grotesque faces. But no one showed any interest in the strangers. Every gnome seemed to be as busy as it was sad, though Jill never found what they were so busy about. But the endless moving, shoving, hurrying, and the soft pad went on. At last they came to what appeared to be a great castle, though few of the windows in it were lighted. Here they were taken in and made to cross a courtyard, and to climb many staircases. This brought them in the end to a great murkily lit hall. But in one corner of it, oh joy, there was an archway filled with a quite different sort of light, the honest, yellowish, warm light of such a lamp as humans use. What showed by this light inside the archway was the foot of a staircase, which wound upward between walls of stone. The light seemed to come from the top. Two Earthmen stood one on each side of the arch, like sentries or footmen. The warden went up to these two and said, as if it were a password, "Many sink down to the underworld." "And few return to the sunlit lands," they answered, as if it were the countersign. Then all three put their heads together and talked. At last, one of the two gnomes in waiting said, "I tell you, the Queen's Grace has gone from hence on her great affair. We had best keep these top dwellers in straight prison till our homecoming. Few return to the sunlit lands." At that moment, the conversation was interrupted by what seemed to be Jill. The most delightful noise in the world. It came from above, from the top of the staircase, and it was a clear, ringing, perfectly human voice, the voice of a young man. "What call are you keeping down there?" "What call are you keeping down there, Melhu Gantharum?" it shouted. "Overworlders! Ha! Bring them up to me!" it shouted. "Overworlders! Ha! Bring them up to me, and that presently." "Please it to your highness to remember," began Melhu Gantharum, but the voice cut him short. It pleases my highness principally to be obeyed, old mutterer. Bring them up." it called. Muller Gutherham shook his head, motioned to the travelers to follow, and began going up the staircase. At every step, the light increased. There were rich tapestries hanging on the walls. The lamplight shone golden through thin curtains at the staircase head. The earthman parted the curtains and stood aside. The three passed in. They were in a beautiful room, rich tapestried, with a bright fire on the clean hearth, and red wine and cut glass sparkling on the table. A young man with fair hair rose to greet them. He was handsome, and looked both bold and kind, though there was something about his face that didn't seem quite right. He was dressed in black, and altogether looked a little bit like Hamlet. "Welcome, overworlders," he cried. "But stay a moment, I cry you mercy. I have seen you two fair children, and this your strange governor, before. Was it not you three that met me by the bridge on the borders of Edensmore when I rode there by my lady's side?" "Oh, you were the Black Knight who never spoke?" exclaimed Jill. And was that lady the Queen of the Underland?" asked Puddleglum in no friendly voice, and Scrub, who was thinking the same, burst out, "Because if it was, I think she was jolly mean to send us to a castle of giants who intended to eat us. What harm have we ever done to her? I should like to know." "How?" said the Black Knight with a frown. "If you were not so young a warrior, boy, you and I might have fought to the death in this quarrel. I can hear no words against my lady's honor, but of this you may be assured, that whatever she said to you, she said of a good intent. You do not know her. She is a nosegay of all virtues, as truth, mercy, constancy, gentleness, courage, and the rest. I say what I know. Her kindness to me alone, who can in no way reward her, would make an admirable history, but you shall know and love her hereafter. Meanwhile, what is your errand in the deep lands?" And before Puddleglum could stop her, Jill blurted out, "Please try to find Prince Relian of Narnia." And then she realized what a frightful risk she had taken. These people might be enemies, but the knight showed no interest. "Relian? Narnia?" he said carelessly. "Narnia? What land is that? I have never heard the name. It must be 1,000 leagues from those parts of the overworld that I know. But it was a strange fantasy that brought you seeking this. How do you call him? Billion? Trillion? In my lady's realm? Indeed, to my certain knowledge, there is no such man here." He laughed very loudly at this. And Jill thought to herself, I wonder, is that what's wrong with his face? Is he a bit silly? "We had been told to look for a message on the stones of the city ruinous," said Scrub, "and we saw the words, 'under me.'" The knight laughed even more heartily than before. You were the more deceived," he said. "These words meant nothing to your purpose. Had you but asked my lady, she could have given you better counsel. For those words are all that is left of a longer script, which in ancient times, as she well remembers, expressed this verse: Though under earth and throneless now I be, yet while I lived, all earth was under me. From which it is plain that some great king of the ancient giants, who lives buried there, caused this boast to be cut in a stone over his sepulchre? Though the breaking up of some stones and the carrying away of others for new buildings and the... Sorry, I got distracted. Going back a little bit. Sepulchre. Though the breaking up of some stones and the carrying away of others for new buildings and the filling up of the cuts with rubble has left only 2 words that still can be read. Is it not the merriest jests in the world that you should have thought they were written to you? This was like cold water down the back to Scrub and Jill, for it seemed to them very likely that the words had nothing to do with their quest and all, and that they had never been taken in by a mere accident. "Don't you mind him," said Puddleglum. "There are no accidents. Our guide is Aslan, and he was there when the Giant King caused the letters to be cut, and he knew already all things that would come of them, including this." "This guide of yours must be a long liver, friend," said the knight with another one of his laughs. Jill began to find them a little irritating. "And it seems to me, sir," answered Puddleglum, "that this lady of yours must be a long liver too, if she remembers the verse as it was when they first cut it." "Very shrewd, Frog-face," said the knight, clapping Puddleglum on the shoulder, and laughing again. "And you have hit the truth. She is of divine race, and knows neither age nor death. I am more thankful to her for all her infinite bounty to such a poor mortal wretch as I, for you must know, sirs, I am a man under the most strange affliction, and none but the Queen's Grace would have had patience with me. Patience, said I, but it goes far beyond that. She has promised me a great kingdom in Overland, and when I am king, her own most gracious hand in marriage. But the tale is too long for you to hear, fasting and standing. Hi there, some of you. Bring wine and updwellers, food for my guest. Please, you, be seated, gentlemen. Little maiden, sit in this chair. You shall hear it all. End of chapter 10. And I realize I pronounced that word wrong, so it's fine. I knew that it was a tomb, but I just never learned how to say it properly. I never ever saw it written, but I thank you for the definition. Let's see here. Surprise raids. Lesson learned in 12 races at the end. Santa! Yeah. I'm glad the stream title makes sense now. Warm, slightly cocoa water. Be safe, Summer. Have fun. Miss you already. Merkley. Nope, not a real word. Just, it was so odd to me. Hey, Slushy, good to see ya. Hope you're doing well. Thanks for being here. You look like Hamlet. That's what it said. I don't know how that's a description, but it is. Like, I can't describe this character myself, so here, go. I'm gonna go reference you to Shakespeare, which I hope you know, or if you don't, read it, and then you'll know what I'm talking about. Oh, okay. Thanks, Mr. Lewis. It's a Donkey Kong Country playlist there. It's just a random array of video game music, so it might have been Donkey Kong Country at that time. I have no idea what it is right now. I can't hear any of it, because if I played it loud enough for me to hear, it would go through my mic, and yeah. Sepulcher. Okay. Welcome home, Tori. I'm glad you made it safely. Frog face. Thanks for the claps. Both Ready and Tori. Just say tomb, C.S. Lewis. Why you gotta be that way? It's also nice to know the T has a face. I assumed he was a disembodied voice. Well, I mean, I did call myself Disembodio for a while. And yes, it's a mug with Growlithe on it. And there's Growlithe's butt. Look at it. Don't report me to Twitch. This playlist is quite... Okay, I'm glad. It's like 3 hours long, so, you know. We'll see. Twix is just eating and staring at me. Like, this is what I'm doing. And you're reading like a nerd. Really loves the mug due to having a butt on it. Well, yeah. Even better seeing the mug fully that time. It's true. Oh, it's true. So, I don't know why, but I kept thinking that, like, the underdwellers, the gnome people, because A, it's green, and B, there's Growlithe. Well, I do enjoy Growlithe. A Growlithe! So, for some reason, and maybe it's just because I was made aware of this recently, recently being the last month or so, but I can't help but imagine that some of the underdweller gnome people would have their own, like, little greeting dance for some reason. Like, it'd still be sad, but I kind of imagine them doing this as their little greeting. And their little greeting would just be slap, slap, slap. Clap, clap, clap. Slap, slap, slap. Clap, clap, clap. Don't look at me weird, Twix. You're not judging me. I love me. Yeah. Except they'd be a lot sadder. Oh, God. This is too great to imagine in my head. I guess they'd just be like, slap, 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 clap, clap, clap. And there's like 100 of them doing it all at once. Anyway, let's move on to the next chapter now that I've done that. Just to see the little dwarf hands trying to reach each other in the air, but they can't. I mean, you're welcome to clip whatever you want. Okay. Chapter the 11th. In the Dark Castle! When the meal, which was pigeon pie, cold ham, salad, and cakes, that sounds delicious, had been brought, and all had drawn their chairs up to the table and begun, the knight continued, "You must understand, friends, that I know nothing of who I was and whence I came into this dark world. Thor, I remember no time when I was not dwelling, as now, at the court of all this but heavenly queen. But my thought is that she saved me from some evil enchantment and brought me hither of her exceeding bounty. Honest Frogfoot, your cup is empty, suffer me to refill it. And this seems to me the likelier because even now I am bound by a spell from which my lady alone can free me. Every night there comes an hour when my mind is most horribly changed, and after my mind, my body, for first I was become furious and wild, and would rush upon my dearest friends to kill them, if I were not bound. And soon after that I turn into the likeness of a great serpent, hungry, fierce, deadly. Sir, be pleased to take another breast of pigeon, I entreat you. So they tell me, and they certainly speak truth, for my lady says the same. I myself know nothing of it, for when my hour is past, I awake forgetful of all that vile fit, and in my proper shape and sound mind, saving that I am somewhat wearied. Little lady, eat one of those honey cakes, which are brought for me from some barbarous land in the far south of the world. Now the Queen's Majesty knows by her art that I shall be freed from this enchantment when once she has made me king of a land in overworld, and set its crown upon my head. The land is already chosen, and the very place of our breaking out. Her earthmen have worked day and night digging away beneath it, and now have gone so far and so high that they tunnel not a score of feet beneath the very grass the updwellers of the country walk. It will be very soon now that these uplanders' fate will come upon them. She herself is at the diggings tonight, and I expect the message to go to her. Then the thin roof of earth which still keeps me from my kingdom will be broken through, and with her to guide me and 1,000 earthmen at my back, I shall ride forth in arms, fall suddenly on our enemies, slay their chief man, cast down their strong places, and doubtless be their crowned king within 24 hours. It's a bit rough luck on them, isn't it? Said Scrub. Thou art a lad of wondrous quick-working wit, exclaimed the knight. For, on my honour, I had never thought of it so before. I see your meaning. He looked very slightly troubled for a moment or two, but his face soon cleared, and he broke out with another one of his loud laughs. But... Sorry, Twix. But fie on gravity. Is it not the most comical and ridiculous thing in the world to think of them all going about their business, and never dreaming that under their peaceful fields and floors, only a fathom down, there is a great army ready to break out upon them like a fountain? And they never have suspected why they themselves, when once the first smart of their defeat is over, can hardly choose but laugh at the thought. I don't think that's funny at all, said Jill. I think you'll be a wicked tyrant. What? Said the knight, still laughing and patting her head in a quite infuriating fashion. Is our little maid a deep politician? But never fear, sweetheart. In ruling the land, I shall do all by the counsel of my lady, who will then be my queen too. Her word shall be my law, even as my word will be law to the people we have conquered. Where I come from, said Jill, who was disliking him more every minute, they don't think much of men who are bossed around by their wives. Pardon me. Shalt think otherwise when thou hast a man of thine own, I warrant you, said the knight, apparently thinking this very funny. But with my lady, it is another matter. I am well content to live by her word, who has already saved me from 1,000 dangers. No mother has taken pains more tenderly for a child than the Queen's grace has for me. Why, look you, amid all her cares and business, she rideth out with me in the overworld many a time, and oft to accustom my eyes to the sunlight, and then I must go fully armed and with visor down, so that no man may see my face, and I must speak to no one, for she has found out by art magical that that this would hinder my deliverance from the grievous enchantment I lie under. Is that not the lady worthy of a man's whole worship? Sounds like a very nice lady indeed, said Puddleglum in a voice which meant exactly the opposite. They were thoroughly tired of the night's talk before they had finished supper. Puddleglum was thinking, I wonder what game that witch is really playing with that young fool. Scrub was thinking, he's a great baby, really, tied to that woman's apron strings. What a sap. And Jill was thinking, I like ponies. He's the silliest, most conceited, selfish pig I've met for a long time. But when the meal was over, the knight's mood had changed. There was no more laughter about him. Friends, he said, my hour is now very near. I am ashamed that you should see me yet. I dread for being left alone. They will come in presently, and bind me hand and foot to yonder chair. Alas, so it must be, for in my fury they tell me, I would destroy all that I could reach. I say, said Scrub, I'm awfully sorry about your enchantment, of course. But what will those fellows do to us when they come to bind you? They talk to putting us in prison, and we don't like all those dark places very much. We'd much rather stay here till you're better, if we may. It is well thought of, said the knight. By custom, none but the Queen herself remains with me in my evil hour. Such is her tender care for my honor, that she would not willingly suffer any ears but her own to hear the words I utter in that frenzy. But I could not easily persuade my attendant gnomes that you should be left with me, and I think I hear their soft feet even now upon the stairs. Go through yonder door. It leads into my other apartments. And there either await my coming when they have unbound me, or, if you will, return and sit with me in my ravings. They followed his directions and passed out of the room by a door which had yet been seen opened. It brought them, they were pleased to see, not into darkness, but into a lighted corridor. They tried various doors and found what they very badly needed, water for washing and even a looking-glass. He never offered us a wash-up before supper, said Jill, drying her face. Selfish, self-centered pig. Are we going back to watch the enchantment, or shall we stay here, said Scrub. Stay here, I vote, said Jill. I'd much rather not see it, but she felt a little inquisitive all the same. No, go back, said Puddleglum. We may pick up information, and we need all we can get. I'm sure that the Queen is a witch and an enemy, and those Earthmen would knock us on her head as soon as look at us. There's a stronger smell of danger and lies and magic and treason about this land than I've ever smelled before. We need to keep our eyes and ears open. They went back down the corridor and gently pushed it open. It's all right, said Scrub, meaning that there were no Earthmen about. Then they all came back into the room where they had supped. The main door was now shut, concealing the curtain between which they had first entered. The knight was seated in a curious silver chair, to which he was bound by his ankles and his knees, his elbows, his wrists, and his waist. There was sweat on his forehead, and his face was filled with an anguish. Come on in, friends, he said, glancing quickly up. The fit is not yet upon me. Make no noise, for I told the prying chamberlain that you were in bed. Now I can feel it coming. Quick, listen while I am a master of myself. When the fit is upon me, it well may be that I shall beg and implore you, with entreaties and threatenings, to loosen my bonds. They say I do. I shall call upon you by all that is most dear and most dreadful, but do not listen to me. Harden your hearts and stop your ears. For while I'm bound, you are safe. But if once I were up and out of this chair, then first would come my fury, and after that, the change into a loathsome serpent. There's no fear of our loosing you, said Puddleglum. We've no wish to meet wild men, or serpents either. I should think not, said Scrub and Jill together. Well, I guess they sounded the same there. All the same, added Puddleglum in a whisper. Don't let's be too sure. Let's be on our guard. We've muffed everything else, you know. He'll be cunning. I shouldn't wonder, once he gets started. Can we trust one another? Do we all promise that whatever he says, we don't touch those cords? Whatever he says, mind you? Rather, said Scrub. There's nothing in the world he can say or do that'll make me change my mind, said Jill. Hush, something's happening, said Puddleglum. The knight was moaning. Oh, 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 oh. His face was as pale as putty, and he writhed in his bonds, and whether because she was sorry for him or for some other reason, Jill thought that he looked a nicer sort of man than he had looked before. Ah, he groaned. Enchantments, enchantments. The heavy, tangled, cold, clammy web of evil magic, buried alive, dragged down under the earth, and down into the sooty blackness. How many years is it? Have I lived 10 years, or 1,000 years in the pit? Maggot men all around me. Oh, have mercy. Let me out. Let me go back. Let me feel the wind and see the sky. There used to be a little pool. When you looked down into it, you could see all the trees growing upside down in the water, all green, all below them. Deep, very deep, the blue sky. He had been speaking in a low voice. Yep, that was a low voice. Now he looked up, fixed his eyes upon him, and said loud and clear, Quick, I am sane now. Every night I am sane. If only I could get out of this enchanted chair, it would last. I shall be a man again but every night they bind me, and so every night my chance is gone. But you are not my enemies. I am not your prisoner. Quick, cut these cords. Stand fast, steady, said Puddleglum to the two children. I beseech you to hear me, said the knight, forcing himself to speak calmly. Have they told you that if I release from this chair, I shall kill you and become a serpent? I see by the faces that they have. It is a lie. It is at this hour that I am in my right mind. It is all the rest of the day that I am enchanted. You are not earthmen nor witches. Why should you be on their side? Of your courtesy, cut my bonds. Steady, 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 said the three travelers to another. Oh, you have hearts of stone, said the knight. Believe me, you look upon a wretch who has suffered almost more than any mortal can bear. What wrong have I ever done to you, that you should side with my enemies to keep me in such miseries? And the minutes are slipping past. Now you can save me. When this hour is past, I shall be witless again, the toy and lapdog, nay, more likely the pawn and tool, of the most devilish sorceress that ever planned the woe of men. And this night of all nights, when she is away, you take me from a chance that may never come again. This is dreadful. I do wish we'd stay away until it was over, said Jill. Steady, said Puddleglum. The prisoner's voice was now rising to a shriek. Let me go, I say. Give me my sword. My sword. Once I am free, I shall take such revenge on Earthmen that Underland will talk of it for 1,000 years. Now the frenzy is beginning, said Scrub. I hope these knots are all right. Yes, said Puddleglum. He'd have twice his natural strength if he got free now. And if I'm not clever with my sword, he'd get us both. I shouldn't wonder. And then Pole, on her own, would be left to tackle the snake. The prisoner was now straining at his bonds that they cut into his wrists and ankles. Beware, he said. Beware. One night I did break them, but the witch was there that time. You will not have her to help you tonight. Free me now, and I am your friend. I am your mortal enemy else. Cunning, isn't he? Said Puddleglum. Once and for all, said the prisoner, I adjure you to set me free. By all fears and all loves, by the great skies of Overland, by the great lion, by Aslan himself, I charge you. Oh, said the three travelers, as though they had been hurt. It's the sign, said Puddleglum. It was the words of the sign, said Scrub more cautiously. Oh, what are we to do? Said Jill. It was a dreadful question. What had been the use of promising one another that they would not on any account set the knight free, if they were now to do so the first time he happened to call upon a name they really cared about? On the other hand, what had been the use of learning the signs if they weren't going to obey them? Yet could Aslan have really meant them to unbind anyone, even a lunatic who asked it in his name? Could it be a mere accident? Or how if the queen of the underworld knew all about the signs and had made the knight learn from his name simply in order to entrap them? But then, supposing this was the real sign, they have muffed 3 already. They daren't muff the 4th. Oh, if only we knew, said Jill. I think we do know, said Puddleglum. Do you mean you think everything will come right if we do untie him? Said Scrub. I don't know about that, said Puddleglum. You see, Aslan didn't tell Pole what would happen. He only told her what to do. That fellow will be the death of us once he's up. I shouldn't wonder, but that doesn't let us all follow in the sun. They all stood looking at one another with bright eyes. It was a sickening moment. All right, said Jill suddenly. Let's get it over. Goodbye, everyone. They all shook hands. The knight was screaming by now. There was foam on his cheeks. Come on, Scrub, said Puddleglum. He and Scrub drew their swords and went over to the captive. In the name of Aslan, they said, and began methodically cutting the cords. The instant the prisoner was free, he crossed the room in a single bound, seized his own sword, which had been taken from him and laid on the table, and drew it. You first, he cried, and fell upon the silver chair. That must have been a good sword. The silver gave way before its edge like string, and in a moment, a few twisted fragments shining on the floor were all that was left. But as the chair broke, there came from it a bright flash, a sound like small thunder, and, for one moment, a loathsome smell. Lie there, vile engine of sorcery, he said, lest your mistress should ever use you for another victim. Then he turned and surveyed his rescuers, and the something wrong, whatever it was, had vanished from his face. What? He cried, turning to Puddleglum. Do I see before me a Marshwiggle, a real-life, honest Narnian Marshwiggle? Oh, so you have heard of Narnia after all, said Jill. Had I forgotten it when I was under the spell? Asked the knight. Well, that and all other bedevilments now over, you may well believe that I know Narnia, for I am Relian, Prince of Narnia, and Caspian, the great king, is my father. Your Royal Highness, said Puddleglum, sinking on one knee, and the children did the same. We have come hither for no other end than to seek you. And who are your other deliverers? Said the prince to Scrub and Jill. We were sent by Aslan himself from beyond the world's end to seek your highness, said Scrub. I am Eustace, who sailed with him to the island of Ramandu. I owe all three of you greater debt than I can ever pay, said Prince William. But my father, is he yet still alive? He sailed east again before we left Narnia, my lord, said Puddleglum, but your highness must consider that the king is very old. It is 10 to 1 his majesty must die on the voyage. He is old, you say? How long have I been in the power of the witch? It is more than 10 years since your highness was lost in the woods at the north side of Narnia. 10 years, said the prince, drawing his hand across his face as if to rub away the past. Yes, I believe you, for now that I am myself, I can remember that enchanted life. Though while I was enchanted, I could not remember my true self. And now, fair friends... But wait, I hear their feet. Doesn't that sicken a man, that padding, woolly tread? On the stairs. Lock the door, boy, or stay. I have a better thought than that. I will fool these earthmen if Aslan gives me the wit. Take your cue from me. He walked resolutely to the door and flung it wide open. End of chapter 11. Pigeon pie. I thought the good grief was in relation to my incredibly loud and obnoxious laugh. I'm glad it wasn't. I'm glad it was in relation to V clearly watching an ND stream. And yes, poor Twix indeed. Infuriating head pats. I like ponies. Is this the light bonds we were talking about earlier, Rids? 50 Shades of Narnia. 50 Shades of Silver. Okay, so T's voice is more soothing than I thought. Need to head to bed. Okay, Slushy, I'm sure you've already gone, but have a good night if you haven't, and thanks for being here for however long you could be. Hope you have a good one. Check you later. ASMR strikes again. Sure. Good night, Slush. Much love and sweet dreams to you all. It was a sickening moment. Thunder. Thunder. Hey, Twix. Chapter 11 claps. Getting the snack between chapters. Sounds good. And thank you for the claps. Really, Toria. HS. All the claps. Well, right, Tara, I gotta say goodnight here since I'll be up early tomorrow. Good night to you and good night to everybody else. Until next time. Okay. Thank you first. Thanks for being here, Rob. I hope you have a good night. I hope your church sale goes well. Have a fun time. as fun as you can have. And I'm sure I'll check you later. Yeah, I made it to another chapter. Mm-hmm. All gone. Now I drink water. Welcome back, Tori. I hope you got a good snack between chapters. Let's see here. Ooh. Ooh, I forgot who Eric was. Now I want to search. So forgive me for a second while I forget my own levels. Do. Oh, right. Never mind. He was the Phantom. Yep, it was Phantom of the Opera. I forgot for a moment. Good for me. Reddy's a friendly ghost. And HS is a giggling ghoul. I made these a while ago, so I kind of forgot some of them. Good for me. Good for me. It's not really an excuse, but it's the excuse I'm using. Nope. Not this time. I wasn't on the right side. I don't remember what side of the face his mask was on, or it was covering. Yeah. Which side is Two-Face's scarred face? Pretty sure they're the same character. Left or camera left? Alright. Good. It's like I have a little like singing in my chat. It's wonderful. Wonderful. What have I done? All right. Excuse me. Chapter the 12th. The Queen of Underland. I did start you singing. I was gonna fall for it. I do it no justice, though I'm sure you all would sing it beautifully. Chapter the 12th. The Queen of Underland. Two Earthmen entered, but instead of advancing into the room, they placed themselves one on each side of the door, and bowed deeply. They were followed immediately by the last person whom anyone had expected or wished to see, the Lady of the Green Kirtle, the Queen of the Underland. She stood dead still in the doorway, and they could see her eyes moving as she took in the whole situation, the three strangers, the silver chair destroyed, the prince free, and with his sword in his hand. She turned very white, but Jill thought it was some sort of whiteness that comes over some people's faces, not when they are frightened, but when they are angry. For a moment the witch fixed her eyes on the prince, and there was murder in them. Then she seemed to change her mind. "Leave us," she said to the two Earthmen, and let none disturb us till I call on the pain of death." The gnomes padded away obediently, and the witch queen shut and locked the door. "How now, brown cow, my lord prince," she said. "Has your nightly fit not yet come upon you, or is it over so soon? Why stand you here unbound? Who are these aliens? And is it they who have destroyed the chair which your only safety?" Prince William shivered as she spoke to him, and no wonder. It is not easy to throw off in a half an hour an enchantment which has made one a slave for 10 years. Then, speaking with great effort, he said, "Madam, there is no more need for that chair, and you, who have told me 100 times how deeply you pitied me for the sorceries by which I was bound, will doubtless hear with joy that they are now ended forever. There was, it seems, some small error in your ladyship's way of treating them. These, my true friends, have delivered me. I am now in my right mind, and there are 2 things I will say to you. First, as for your ladyship's design of putting me at the head of an army of Earthmen, that so now I may break out into the overworld and there, by main force, make myself king over some nation they never did me wrong, murdering their natural lords and holding their throne as a bloody and foreign tyrant. Now that I know myself, I do utterly abhor and renounce it as plain villainy. And second, I am the king's son of Narnia, William, the only child of Caspian, 10th of that name, whom some call Caspian the Seafarer. Therefore, madam, it is my purpose, as it is also my duty, to depart suddenly from your highness's court into my own country. Please it you to grant me and my friends safe conduct and a guide through your dark realm." Now the witch said nothing at all, but moved gently across the room, always keeping her face and eyes very steadily toward the prince. When she had come to the little arc set in the wall, not far from the fireplace, she opened it, and took out first a handful of green powder. This she threw on the fire. It did not blaze much, but a very sweet and drowsy smell came from it, and all through the conversation which followed, the smell grew stronger, and filled the room, and made it harder to think. Secondly, she took out a musical instrument, rather like a mandolin. She began to play it with her fingers, a steady, monotonous thrumming that you didn't notice after a few minutes, but the less you noticed it, the more it got into your brain and your blood. This also made it hard to think. After she had thrummed for a time, and that sweet smell was now so strong, she began speaking in a sweet, quiet voice. "Narnia," she said. "Narnia? I have often heard your lordship utter that name in your ravings. Dear prince, you are very sick. There is no land called Narnia." "Yes, there is, though, ma'am," said Puddleglum. "You see, I happen to have lived there all my life." "Indeed," said the witch. "Tell me, I pray you, where that country is." "Up there," said Puddleglum, stoutly, pointing overhead. I don't know exactly where." "How?" said the queen, in a kind, soft, musical laugh. "How is there a country up among the stones and mortar of the roof?" "No," said Puddleglum, struggling a little to get his breath. It's in Overworld." "And what, or where, pray is this, how do you call it? Overworld?" "Oh, don't be so silly," said Scrub, who was fighting hard against the enchantment of the sweet smell and the thrumming. "As if you didn't know, it's up above, where you can see the sky and the sun and the stars. Why, you've been there yourself. We met you there." "I cry you mercy, little brother," laughed the witch. You couldn't have heard a lovelier laugh. Nailed it. First try. "I have no memory of that meeting. But we often meet our friends in strange places when we dream, and unless all dreamed alike, you must not ask them to remember it." "Madam," said the prince sternly, "I have already told your grace that I am the king's son of Narnia." "And shalt be, dear friend," said the witch in a soothing voice, as if she was humoring a child, "shalt be king of many imagined lands in thy fancies." "We've been there too," snapped Jill. She was very angry because she could feel enchantment getting hold of her every moment, but of course the very fact that she could still feel it showed that it had not yet fully worked. "And thou art queen of Narnia too, I doubt not, pretty one," said the witch in the same coaxing, half-mocking tone. "I'm nothing of the sort," said Jill, stamping her foot. We come from another world. Why, this is a prettier game than the other, said the witch. Tell us, little maid, where is this other world? What ships and chariots go between it and ours? Of course, a lot of things darted into Jill's head at once. Experiment house, Adela Pennyfather, her own home, radio sets, cinemas, cars, airplanes, ration books, queues, but they seemed dim and far away. Thrum, 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 went the strings of the witch's instrument. Jill couldn't remember the names of the things in our world, and this time it didn't come into her head that she was being enchanted. For now the magic was in its full strength, and of course, the more enchanted you get, the more you feel that you are not enchanted at all. She found herself saying, and at the moment it was a relief to say, No, I suppose that other world must be all a dream. Yes, it is all a dream, said the witch, always strumming. Yes, all a dream, said Jill. There never was such a world, said the witch. No, said Jill and Scrub. Never was such a world. There never was any world but mine, said the witch. There never was any world but yours, said they. Puddleglum was still fighting hard. I don't know rightly what you all mean by a world, he said, talking like a man who hasn't had enough air. But you play that fiddle till your fingers drop off, and still you won't make me forget Narnia, and the whole overworld too. We'll never see it again, I shouldn't wonder. You may have blotted it out, and turned in the dark like this, for all I know. Nothing more likely, but I know I was there once. I've seen the sky full of stars. I've seen the sun coming up out of the sea of a morning and sinking behind the mountains at night. And I've seen him up in the midday sky when I couldn't look at him for brightness. Puddleglum's words had a very rousing effect. The other three all breathed again, and looked at each other like people newly awakened. Well, there it is, cried the prince. Of course, the blessing of Aslan upon this honest Marshwiggle. We have all been dreaming these last few minutes. How could we have forgotten it? Of course we've all seen the sun. By Jove, we have, said Scrub. Good for you, Puddleglum. You're the only one of us with any sense, I do believe. Then came the witch's voice, cooing softly like the voice of a wood pigeon from the high elms in an old garden at 3 o'clock in the middle of the sleepy summer afternoon, and it said, What is this sun you all speak of? Do you mean anything by this word? Yes, we jolly well do, said Scrub. Can you tell me what it's like? Asked the witch. Thrum, thrum, a thrum, went the strings. Please, your grace, said the prince, very coldly and politely. You see that lamp? It is round and yellow, and gives light to the whole room, and hangeth moreover from the roof. Now that thing which we call the sun is like that lamp, only far greater and brighter. It giveth light to the whole world, overworld, and hangeth in the sky. Hangeth from what, my lord? Asked the witch, and then, while they were all still thinking how to answer, she added, with another of her soft silver laughs, You see, when you try to think out clearly what this sun must be, you cannot tell me. You can only tell me it is like the lamp. The lamp is the real thing. The sun is but a tale, a children's story. Yes, I see now, said Jill in a heavy, hopeless tone. It must be so. And while she said this, it seemed to her to be very good sense. Slowly and gravely the witch repeated, There is no sun. And they all said nothing. She repeated in a softer and deeper voice, There is no sun. After a pause, and after a struggle in their minds, all 4 of them said together, You are right. There is no sun. It was such a relief to give in and say it. There never was a sun, said the witch. There never was a sun, said the prince and the Marshwiggle, and the children. For the last few minutes, Jill had been feeling that there was something she must remember at all costs, and now she did, but it was dreadfully hard to say it. She felt as if huge weights were laid on her lips. At last, with an effort that seemed to take all that's good out of her, she said, There's Aslan. Aslan, said the witch, quickening ever so slightly the pace of her thrumming. What a pretty name. What does it mean? He is the great lion who called us out of our own world. Sorry. He is the great lion who called us out of our own world, said Scrub, and sent us into this to find Prince William. What is a lion? Asked the witch. Oh, hang it all, said Scrub. Don't you know? How can we describe it to her? Have you ever seen a cat? Surely, said the queen. I love cats. Well, Well, a lion only a little bit, mind you, like a huge cat with a mane. At least it's not like a horse's mane, you know. It's more like a judge's wig, and it's yellow and terrifically strong. The witch shook her head. I see, she said, that we should do no better with your lion, as you call it, than we did with your son. You have seen lamps, and so you imagined a bigger and better lamp, and called it the sun. You've seen cats, and now you want a bigger and better cat, and it's to be called a lion? Well, 'tis a pretty make-believe, though. To say truth, it would suit you all better if you were younger. And look how you can put nothing into your make-believe without copying it from the real world, this world of mine, which is the only world, and even you children are too old for such play. As for you, my lord prince, that art a man full grown. Fie upon you! Are you not ashamed of such toys? Come, all of you, put away these childish tricks. I have work for you all in the real world. There is no Narnia, no overworld, no sky, no sun, no Aslan, and now to bed all. And let us begin a wiser life tomorrow. But first to bed, to sleep. Deep sleep, soft pillows, sleep without foolish dreams. The prince and the two children were standing with their heads hung down, their cheeks flushed, their eyes half closed, the strength all gone from them, the enchantment almost complete. But Puddleglum, desperately gathering all his strength, walked over to the fire, and they did a very brave thing. He knew it wouldn't hurt him quite as much as it would have hurt a human, for his feet, which were bare, were webbed and hard and cold-blooded, like a duck's. But he knew it would hurt him badly enough, and so it did. With his bare foot, he stamped on the fire, grinding a huge part of it into the ashes of the flat hearth, and three things happened at once. First, the sweet, heavy smell grew very much less, for though the whole fire had not been put out, a good bit of it had, and what remained smelled very largely of burnt marsh wiggle, which is not at all an enchanting smell. This instantly made everyone's brain far clearer. The prince and the children held up their heads again and opened their eyes. Secondly, the witch, in a loud, terrible voice, utterly different from all the sweet tones she had been using up till now, called out, "What are you doing? Dare to touch my fire again, mud filth, and I'll turn the blood to fire inside your veins!" Thirdly, the pain itself made Puddleglum's head for a moment perfectly clear, and he knew exactly what he really thought. There is nothing like a good shock of pain for dissolving certain kinds of magic. "One word, ma'am," he said, coming back from the fire, limping because of the pain. "One word. All you've been saying is quite right. I shouldn't wonder. I'm a chap who always liked to know the worst, and then put the best face I can on it. So I won't deny any of what you said. But there's one thing more to be said. Even so, suppose we have only dreamed or made up all these things. Trees and grass and sun and moon and the stars and Aslan himself. Suppose we have. Then all we can say is that, in that case, the made-up things seem a good deal more important than the real ones. Suppose the black pit of a kingdom of yours is the only world. Well, it strikes me as a pretty poor one, and that's a funny thing when you come to think of it. We're just babies making up a game. If you're right, but 4 babies playing a game can make a play world which licks your real world hollow. That's why I'm going to stand by the play world. I'm on Aslan's side, even if there isn't any Aslan to lead it. I'm going to live as like a Narnian as I can, even if there isn't any Narnia. So thanking you kindly for our supper, if these 2 gentlemen and the young lady are ready, we're leaving your court at once, and setting out in the dark to spend our lives looking for Overland. Not that our lives will be very long, I should think, but that's a small loss if the world's as dull as a place, as you say." "Oh, hurrah! Good old Puddleglum!" cried Scrub and Jill, but the prince shouted suddenly, "Where? Look to the witch!" When they did look, their hair nearly stood on the end. The instrument dropped from her hands. Her arms appeared to be fastened to her sides. Her legs were intertwined with each other, and her feet had disappeared. The long green train of her skirt thickened and grew solid, and seemed to be all one piece with the writhing green pillar of her interlocked legs. And that writhing green pillar was curving and swaying as if it had no joints, or were all joints. Her head was thrown far back. Her head was thrown far back, and while her nose grew longer and longer, every other part of her face seemed to disappear, except her eyes, huge flaming eyes that were now without brows or lashes. All this takes time to write down. It happened so quickly that there was only just time to see it. Long before there was time to do anything, the change was complete, and the great serpent which the witch had become, green as poison, thick as Jill's waist, had flung 2 or 3 coils of its loathsome body around the prince's legs. Quick as lightning, another great loop darted around, intending to pinion his sword arm to his side. But the prince was just in time. He raised his arms and got them clear. The living knot closed only round his chest, ready to crack his ribs like firewood when it drew tight. The prince caught the creature's neck in his left hand, trying to squeeze it till it choked. This held its face, if you can call it a face, about 5 inches from his own. The forked tongue flickered horribly in and out, but could not reach him. With his right hand, he drew back his sword for the strongest blow he could give. Meanwhile, Scrub and Puddleglum had drawn their weapons and rushed to his aid. All 3 blows fell at once. Scrub's, which would not even pierce the scales and did no good, on the body of the snake below the prince's hand, but the prince's own blow and Puddleglum's blow both on its neck. Even that did not quite kill it, though it began to loosen its hold on Lillian's legs and chest. With repeated blows, they hacked off its head. The horrible thing went on coiling and moving like a bit of wire long after it died, and the floor, as you imagine, was a nasty mess. The prince, when he had breath, said, "Gentlemen, I thank you." Then the 3 conquerors stood staring at one another and panting, without another word for a long time. Jill had very wisely sat down and was keeping quiet. She was saying to herself, "I do hope I don't faint, or blub, or do anything idiotic." "My royal mother is avenged," said Lillian presently. "This is undoubtedly the same worm that I pursued in vain by the fountain in the forest of Narnia so many years ago. All these years I have been the slave of my mother's slayer. Yet I am glad, gentlemen, that the foul witch took to her serpent form at the last. It would not have suited well either with my heart or with my honor to have slain a woman. But look to the lady," he meant Jill. "I'm all right, thanks," said she. "Damsel," said the prince, bowing to her, you are of a high courage, and therefore I doubt not you've come of a noble blood in your own world. Become, my friends. Here is some wine left. Let us refresh ourselves, and each pledge his fellows. After that, to our plans." "A jolly good idea, sir," said Scrub. End of chapter 12. And probably for the stream, too. Let's catch up on this stuff. There's the singing. I guess some Final Fantasy VIII music was playing at some point, so that's cool, I guess. Toria's comfy in her bed. I hope that she is enjoying resting. They need earplugs. Yep. There never was a sun. What is a lion? Full of crap. If anything, cats are smaller versions of lions. I assume the voice was for the witch when the witch was set loose. Footloose. Clash for chapter 12. Clash wildly. Understandable. I think that's a good point to end after our hero's triumph, because we still got a few chapters left, but we can save it for the next stream to finish it, because it's still another 50 pages or so. So we'll finish it next stream, next read stream. Well, I think I'll call it there. It was about 2 hours long, so I hope everybody enjoyed. Even if it was some questionable content, mostly the slap, 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 clap, clap, clap thing. But, we'll just forget that ever existed. Thank you all for being here. To the people that popped by earlier, to the people that went to bed already, to the people who are still here, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you all. I hope you enjoyed yourself for the time you were here. No problem for the reading and the streaming. I was glad to do it. I hope everybody enjoyed. Yeah, I hope that you all have great nights or days, depending on where you are. And thank you again so much for being here. I appreciate y'all. Love you lots. And we'll just do the bye command, because I gotta do the bye command. But now we have to go. Good night, everybody.